Hello, everybody. Welcome to my review of Picard Season 1, Episode 2, Maps and Legends. Now, just a warning, here there be spoilers. So if you don't want to be spoiled about this particular episode, then come back after you've watched it. All right? I'll give you a second. All right, now let's get into it. So, this episode starts with a flashback of the attack on Mars that happened 14 years ago. That was sort of the genesis of what made the Romulan rescue fleet collapse and led to Picard ultimately resigning from Starfleet. And so what I thought was interesting about the scene from Mars was a couple of things. One, we actually got to see how synthetic life forms that weren't Data were treated in the Federation. And that's mostly because Data was unique. Like, Data was really humanoid. These other synths, as they're called, are more robotic. They're turned off and on. They're just used for work. There's this really cute exchange where F8, as I'm gonna call him, is having a cute exchange with one of the people that he's working with, and they're like, hell yeah, like he's trying to fit in, but he can't really fit in. And so that's kind of the thing. And a lot of not a lot of them, but you can tell that some of the workers there at the Utopian Mines on Mars are very much very leery of kind of working kind of with synth. So one of the things I found that was interesting about this is that this actually created a class system which didn't exist in Gene Roddenberry's Star Trek, to my knowledge. Because the whole idea was that the Federation, humans had gone beyond money. So why would you be working in a mine? Like, what purpose would that be for? And not only that, but they have crappy food. It sort of sets up a hierarchy of sort of capitalism that we haven't seen before, and they will play on that a little bit later. But I thought that was interesting and something that we hadn't really seen before. And so F8 goes nuts. You can tell by the look on his eyes that he's sort of been programmed to go nuts. He starts messing with the computer. He starts shooting his coworkers, which is just leads right into the invasion, and then ultimately he ends up killing himself, right? And that's what ends up happening. So meanwhile, Picard and his assistants, his Romulan assistants, are trying to figure out what happened to Dash. And we learn that they were members of the Tasha Yar, which is really interesting. So for those of you who may remember, the Tasha Yar is the Romulan secret police. And we did get to see them up close and personal in Face of the Enemy, which was a Diana Troy-centered episode where she was kidnapped by a Romulan agent and had to pretend to be a member of the Tasha Yar in order to help some Romulan defectors escape. That's a really good episode. If you haven't seen it, Next Generation, definitely go see it. And so again, that makes me kind of suspect to look at them, because the Tasha Yar was supposed to be like the worst of the worst, and the fact that they were members of the Tasha Yar again makes me side-eye them. But we'll see. So anyway, they go to Dodge's apartment, and they're able to kind of piece together some of the stuff what happened to her. But on the other hand, like, it's been completely wiped away. Like, all traces of her and her boyfriend have been wiped away. And Lars starts talking about how this seems like it's the work of the secret police, the Zot Dash, hope I'm saying their name correctly, who were the even more secretive than Tasha Yar, and who hated synthetic life. And then she goes to talk about how in Romulan life there's really no sort of synthetic kind of creatures, and they sort of stay away from that, and sort of hinting that there's a bigger mythology to why that is. So meanwhile, we get to see Soji and her and the Romulan who is on the artifact, who we met last week, Narek. They have become a couple. They're an item, and we see them in bed because this is not your granddaddy Star Trek, and people in this Star Trek have sex, and we're gonna see the sexy times unlike before. So, we get to learn a little bit more about her. We get to learn about her compassion, and we see this through the way that she sort of interacts with the non-Borg. And so basically with the artifact, which is a Borg ship that is in Romulan space, that the Romulans now have a claim on, and which is no longer with the collective, there were Borg on there. And so there's scientists in there not only collecting like as much Borg technology as they can, but they're also working to try to deborgify like the people that are like on the ship. And most of the scientists sort of see them sort of as things. They want to get the Borg parts off of them. They refer to them as nameless. They don't really see them sort of as people. And she does, and she speaks to them in their native language, and she's very she's very much concerned about them. She feels a connection to them. Of course, she doesn't know why, but we as the audience kind of knows why, which I think is kind of really important for that. So meanwhile, Picard goes to see someone in Starfleet because he wants to do this investigation. He has all this information, about this whole Romulan conspiracy on Earth, and he's like Captain Picard. Now I really, really love this scene, okay? And what I like about this scene is this idea that how we see ourselves, even in our greatness, is not necessarily how other people see us. So he goes into Starfleet, and the ensign, like at the desk, asks him who he is. Now, when you walk into Starfleet, mind you, the Enterprise D, which he was like the captain of, is like literally like in like the hallway, okay? And Picard is like this huge hero, but the guy has no idea who Picard is. And Picard is like a little bit perturbed. You could tell, like, when he's like, he was spelling his name and looking at him, like, don't you know who I am? Like, don't you know, like, my credentials? Like, don't you know I'm in history books? Like, so I thought that was really interesting. And this plays into when he goes in to talk to the Admiral. Okay, so Picard goes in and he wants to talk to the Admiral about everything that's going on, and he wants to get a ship, right? And so this is a very interesting conversation because he goes in there and he explains everything that happens, and he's all like, I need a ship, I need to do this, I need to do that. And if my rank is too conspicuous, I'll go back down to captain, being really, just sort of like matter of fact. And so the Admiral Clancy is looking at him like, you must be crazy. Like, you resigned from Starfleet in a huff. The last time I saw you, it was on an interview a couple of days ago, trashing Starfleet. And now here you are talking about some Romulan conspiracy. And we're just supposed to give you a ship and like let you go? Like, no. And he was like very arrogant in this scene. And what I liked about it was this idea that sometimes we can be so convinced that we're right that we sometimes aren't able to do the things that we could do, right? So Picard was so convinced that he was right about Starfleet's stance on banning the Sith, about abandoning like the Romulan rescue, that he just could not be a part of Starfleet. He could just not work in this system, And it's like he's just on one side, like this is the right thing to do. And Clancy is trying to explain sort of the nuances of stuff. It wasn't that simple. We had, other races like in Starfleet that were not, feeling this, that were trying to like break away if we did this already. Once the fleet was destroyed, we were down for on resources. We had to deal with our own people and the own terror attack in Mars and everything that was happening. And Picard just like couldn't see that because he was so draped in his self-righteousness. And as somebody who like is a really like huge Picard fan and always wanting to be right and is always on his side, it was kind of a painful like scene to watch because I think it speaks to the danger of always thinking, okay, that you're right, all right, and that there's no sort of room for compromise, all right. And so basically, she tells him, no deal. Get away from here. You're crazy. I don't believe your story. However, she does believe his story just a little bit. She's very unnerved by it. And she calls the chief of Starfleet Security, a Vulcan named Commodore O. Okay. And so she's talking to Commodore O and, telling him, Picard came to see me, rambling on and on and on about, conspiracies and this, that, and the other thing. And I feel really bad for him, because he sounded crazy. But check this out, just in case he's not crazy. And so she decides that she says, there's nothing to it. Obviously, I would know if, something was going on. But, I will check this out. And so, of course, she's a baddie. That doesn't really surprise anybody. And she is working with this lieutenant in Starfleet, and who's a baddie too. And the interesting thing about that is that we find out that not only is she a baddie, Lieutenant Rizzo, but she's also not human, right? She's posing as human. She is a Romulan, and guess whose brother she is, all right? You guessed it, right? Narik. So they're all sort of in collusion together, trying to figure out, what's going on with Daj and Soji, right? And where they kind of fit in. And they keep asking, like, them, which is really interesting because they know where she is, which is interesting because the hired hand thugs, all right, that killed Daj, they don't know where Soji is, but Commodore O and Rizzo and her brother Narik know where she is. So again, it's sort of like, groups within a groups, right? And you're just trying to figure out sort of what's going on with that. So I kind of like that. Oh, and I want to speak again about the Starfleet uniforms. Wasn't really a big fan of them. And they looked a lot like the Deep Space Nine uniforms, but not in a cool way. But, I don't think they're going to be showing Starfleet that much. So they probably didn't want to spend a lot of money into like a redesign of the uniform. But I just kind of wanted to like throw that out there. So meanwhile, just because Picard got, poo-pooed doesn't mean that he still doesn't want to go. And so he's still determined to go. And his doctor, who was the doctor with him on the Stargazer, comes to see him because he's waiting, sort of to get his physical results. And the doctor has bad news, okay? And so Picard has sort of a brain anomaly. We're not exactly sure what it's going to do. There's a hint that it's going to lead to dementia, or it could kill him, or it's going to do both. He's going to suffer from dementia, then eventually die. We're not really sure. There's treatment for it, but there's like apparently no cure. And so this, of course, like made me sad. Like it was a real downer because I was like, I don't want Picard to be sick. It's Picard, but it gives his character like a sense of urgency, almost like this is kind of what he wants his legacy to kind of be. All right. And so that he's on the clock now. And so he really, really wants to do this. All right. So, he tells Loris and Zabeth that he is going to go on this mission. Now Loris thinks that he's like insane. She thinks he's insane. Like, why would you want to go back out into space? Why would you want to do this kind of stuff? She wants like no parts of it. She's just like pissed. Okay, she wants him to just stay on the vineyard, make his grapes, let them make him some Earl Grey tea hot decaf now, feed him some sandwiches, and just rub his head and take care of him until he expires. That's what she wants for him. Dabith understands Picard needs to do this mission. He suggests that he, get a crew that he could trust. He mentions Riker, Worf, and LaForge, which is great because we knew from the previous that Riker was alive, but we didn't know about Worf and LaForge. So that's great that they're still around. And we know this, but Picard doesn't want to do this because he knows that they would do it in a heartbeat, but he doesn't want to get into a situation where they because we don't know where they are right now in Starfleet or their career or whatever, but he doesn't want to get him into trouble. So Beth says, okay, well then you need to get somebody who you could trust, who hates your guts, who has nothing to lose, right? So enter Rafi. All right. So now Rafi, as we know from comic books and things like that, before here was his first officer. And during this rescue mission and things like that, he goes to see her. She is living in a trailer far from nowhere, and she is not happy to see him at all. And that's kind of where we leave it. And so I thought that this episode was pretty good. It's a good setup. I like to see another member of his crew, and Rafi, she seemed to be really interesting, like from the gate. And so it seems to me like we're moving along. Again, I don't trust Loris and Zabeth. I don't know. Finding out they're Tasha, like what are Tasha members doing with Picard? We don't know, right? How they ended up with him. But I just think it's just kind of weird. I don't know. I just feel like there's this whole big conspiracy on Earth, and a part of me still feels like they were put there to sort of watch him to kind of see what's going on. That's still kind of my theory. Soji is warming up on me a little bit because I like Daj better, and I think I like Daj better just because we were introduced to her first and we were seeing things through her eyes, and she seemed to be a little bit like nicer. But again, Soji, she's, warming up to me. It's one of them bait and switch things, that, I just have to sort of get over. So, her relationship with Naris is interesting to me because it's happening like really, really fast. Last week they just met, and this week like they're in bed. So it's kind of like, I guess they're just hooking up or whatever, but it's just kind of interesting, that everything seems to be happening like fairly quickly. I think the idea that Starfleet is not, they're not bad, they're just blind to some of the darkness that's happening within them, and they've let themselves get so caught up in their own fear and their own sort of need for survival and trying to figure things out that they have taken their eye off of some of the things that can really potentially lead to their downfall, like from within. It's one of these things where, people have been coming for Starfleet forever, and nobody's been able to take Starfleet out from without, right? But from within, there's rotting, things are, not copacetic. The apple is rotting from within, the tree is rotting from within. And like Picard told the Admiral Clancy, ignore him at his own peril. Mm-hmm. And so I thought that was interesting. I'm not exactly sure if Commodore O is a Vulcan or a Romulan. I guess we will find that out later. Naris's relationship with his sister is very incestuous almost. I don't know if that's on purpose because they're trying to be edgy, but it's very Game of Thrones-ish. But I guess we'll kind of see sort of what is going on with that. All in all, I thought it was a really good episode. I think it was a really good setup for what's going on. I like, again, with the continuation of the theme of what does it mean to be alive? What does it mean to be human? I think what's going on with the Borg is really interesting. Sort of this idea of what happens to you after you're no longer assimilated. And I think, they touched on that a little bit with 7 of 9 in Voyager, and we'll see some of that when Hugh is introduced in the next episode. And so, again, this has been sort of a really kind of enjoyable ride for me, and I am very much looking forward to what happens next week. And again, if you like this video, please like and please subscribe. And I will be back next week with episode 3. All right, see you later.